The following is one of a number of oral histories being conducted by the Amerishrine Mason History Center located in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. This particular interview was filmed on May 18th, 2004, with Robert J. Bob Body describing his experiences as a survivor of the Bataan Death March and as a Japanese prisoner of war for 1,028 days. This is a second part of a two-part interview of one of our nobles here at AmeriTemple. And the first part we discussed his life as a Mason and as a Shriner and as a clown. And during that interview, and I'm well aware of prior to that as well, but he had mentioned the fact that he was in the military service during World War II, and that he served in the Pacific, and that he was a prisoner of war in Bataan and participated in the Bataan Death March. And at this time, I'd like to introduce a great noble, a great clown, and a great war hero, Bob Body. Afternoon, Bob. Listen, we discussed earlier in another tape about your early life and so forth, but I'd like to just kind of touch on that to get this kicked off and go through up to the time you went into the Canadian Army, and then we'll proceed from there. But where were you born and when?
I was born in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada in 1924. Then we moved to Detroit when I was 2 years old. And then my dad took me back to Canada, and I started school in Canada. And then when the work started out a little bit better in Detroit, then my dad come back up to Canada and took me back to Detroit, where I stayed and started school there when I was a little bit older, and I stayed there until I eventually went in the, I went back to Canada when I quit school, and Canada went to war and enlisted in the Canadian Army.
How old were you when you went into the Canadian Army?
I was 16.
Age 16?
Yeah.
In the Canadian Army?
Yes.
Went to boot camp?
Yes.
They taught you, what was your job in there?
I had a Bren gun. A Bren gun is a British heavy machine gun.
British heavy machine gun,
Yeah.
16 years of age.
Yeah.
Prior to World War II?
No, Canada was at war then.
Because why?
It was, well,
It was part of the British
part of
Empire.
the British Empire, yeah.
Okay.
And I took my basic training for 6 weeks, and we were billeted out in private homes because they didn't have any army posts except up the northern part of Ontario. And we were billeted in private homes where the people were paying, the Army was paying their room and board.
Room and board. And you stayed in the Canadian Army for how long?
Either 6 or 8 months, something like that. I stayed in there until February the 6th of 1941.
And what happened then?
Well, I was getting ready to ship out. We were going to go, I don't know whether we were going to go to Europe or going to be sent to an army post up in northern Canada, but my dad heard about it, and he sent a letter in and told him how old I was.
He snitched on you?
Oh, yeah. Well, it wasn't only that. I really wasn't the best soldier. I was kind of done things my way.
As you are doing?
As I've done all my life.
All your life, up to today, right?
Yeah, up until now. Yeah.
Up until now,
Even later with the Japanese, I've done things my way, as you'll see. And when
At any rate, you wound up getting bounced out of the Canadian Army because you're too young to.
well, the discharge says not likely to become an efficient soldier.
Okay.
I think I could get that changed on the basic of my service here, but I don't bother.
And, okay, so you get out of the Canadian Army, moved back down to
I
Detroit?
Went back down to Detroit.
Asked your father what?
I kind of convinced the old man the best way to get rid of me was to sign my enlistment papers for the U.S. Army.
And how old were you there?
Well, I passed my 17th birthday on Angel Island in San Francisco.
Okay.
I was in the U.S. Army. I went there. I stayed there until April the 1st, waiting for transportation to the Philippines.
Okay. And that was in April?
On April 1st.
April Fool's Day.
That was the worst day of my life.
Worst day of your life.
April 1st, we left San Francisco on the way to Manila.
Okay.
Actually, I enlisted for 2 years foreign service and 1 year of domestic service.
Okay.
But it didn't work out.
All right. So you went to Manila, the Philippines,
Yeah.
and you get over there in
April the 22nd,
April.
1941.
And life was good.
Great. If it had stayed like that, I probably would have died there.
Meaning you were having a good time and enjoying
Wine,
the
women,
good life, right?
Wine, women, and song.
Wine, women, and song from April, and then all of a sudden we're up to December.
Up until Pearl Harbor.
And what happened then?
Well, I was on duty in the Army hospital. I was guarding our prisoners when the officer of the day came along one morning, on Monday morning, and told me to release my prisoners. And I said, why? And he turned to me and he said, soldier, you do not ask P.O.W. why. He said, you release your prisoners. And then he showed me the paper, the newspaper, saying that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. So then, there was no question, I released the prisoners and I returned to my unit.
Returned to your unit, and then what was going on about that time? What?
Well, we were leaving, our unit was leaving our barracks. And the commanding officer said, we'll be back in a couple of weeks, we will send them Japanese out and put them back in the water, and we'll be back in our barracks, so don't take too much stuff. We never seen the barracks again.
Okay, you went down, set up a perimeter.
Dug some holes in the park, and set up our machine guns to protect them now.
Okay, and you were there for about how long?
Well, a week.
About a week?
2 weeks.
And they decided what?
Well, he decided that we should load a ship with some cigarettes, cases of cigarettes, and go to Corregidor with these ships, which we did. We worked all night Christmas Eve of 1941, and then we got on the ship and went to Corregidor. And,
Disembarked over there, set up another perimeter.
well, we didn't set up no perimeter. All we done was lay around.
Lay around.
Until.
Nothing too exciting going on?
No, just watch the porpoise.
You what?
Watch the porpoise.
Watch the porpoise.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the sharks and stuff.
And you were there for?
Until New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve, and they decided finally that you were going where?
No, we didn't decide anything. The Japanese dropped all the bombs that they had in the world on Corregidor that day. And 3 days later, then they decided to take us to Bataan.
And did any of those bombs come close to you?
Yeah, well, there was a couple of them. I was in the barracks, and one of the bombs went through the other side of the room. And I was lucky because it was a dud. It went through and went down to the basement and didn't go off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wouldn't have made any difference because by the time I reached the basement, I was out of the building.
Okay.
And I went from there, and I ran from the building to an air raid shelter. And just as I started down the ramp to the shelter, another bomb went off, and it picked me up and slammed me into the steel door of the air raid shelter. And it knocked me out for a couple of minutes. And when I come to, I thought I was dead. I didn't know. And then somebody hollered at me, "Hey, soldier, you scared?" And I looked, and there was a general, a big car, and a little kid and a woman. So I think it was General MacArthur driving around in an air raid with his wife, and I figured he was some kind of an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "You're damn right I'm scared." He said, "Well, so am I," and I thought he had a hell of a way to show it. So he said, "Carry on." So I took my automatic revolver that I had, and I banged on the door, and the sergeant inside the air raid shelter let me in. And he said, "What are you doing out there?" I said, "I'm trying to get in here." And so I stayed in there until that air raid was over.
Okay.
And then the all clear came in, and then we started looking for a place to be safe.
And how long were you there on Craigador before you moved out of there?
About 3 days.
About 3 days, and what, they decided what?
Well, I don't know. They decided then we should go to Bataan.
Bataan. Now, the Japanese at that point in time was working their way down the peninsula.
Working their way, not down the peninsula, they were working their way down the Philippines.
Down the Philippines.
Down Luzon.
Okay.
Down to Luzon. I don't know whether they knew that we were going to go to Bataan or not.
All right.
But when we left Craigador and went to Bataan, that's when the Japanese went to Bataan.
Okay, and you made it to Bataan, and you had how long before you faced the enemy there, face to face?
I don't know, a couple of days there is.
A couple of days,
Something like that.
and then that's when.
That's when we found out we were not going to be able to, we weren't going to be able to fight them.
Okay.
We couldn't stand the power they had. So we had more firepower.
Okay, but was there a firefight at that point in time?
We met them as soon as we got to a place called, what did I mention here about 2 months ago? That's what happens when you get old, you forget.
I hear you.
We met them San Fernando. We met them right there, and we knew we couldn't stand their firepower. So
Okay.
we had to withdraw for strategic purposes.
And then,
To save them.
how long did that last before the next episode?
Well, we kept moving south, and we kept putting lines in, but we didn't hardly slow them down.
And you were talking about how many days, or?
It wasn't days, it was minutes.
Okay.
I think there was a couple of lines, battles that we had, and might have held them up maybe a couple of days, you know. but
Okay.
not many.
And then word finally came to you from probably an officer or something that what, you're gonna?
No, it was just we left. We had to withdraw because we couldn't stand the power.
Okay, so you withdrew, and
Withdrew.
then how long was it before you were actually captured?
4 months.
Huh?
4 months.
You were still
Yeah,
there?
April the 9th.
And you had engagements?
We had different lines. As we went south, the officers would say, "Well, we're going to make a stand here."
Okay.
So we'd put in another line, and we'd try to hold them there.
Mhm.
And here too, it wasn't possible. We couldn't do it. So then we'd withdraw for another few miles, and the same thing would happen. So this went on for 4 months until we ran out of land.
Okay, they pushed you right down the peninsula?
Right down to where we had nothing but water.
Okay. And how did you get the word about surrendering?
I 2 days, we were in the worst battle that we'd had. We knew this was the end, and I lost it. I didn't know what I was doing. I was out, and I came to on April the 8th in the hospital. And when I came to, I asked one of the corpsmen, where am I? He said, you're in the hospital. I said, what am I doing here? He said, I don't know, but they brought you in here yesterday, screaming and hollering and crying. I said, I gotta get the hell out of here and get back with my unit. He said, don't bother, because I understand they're gonna surrender. He said, don't think about going anywhere, because you're better off here. I said, where's my sidearm? He said, we took it. He said, you're not gonna need that no more. I said, I still think I should go back to my unit, because I don't think you have a unit anymore. He said, everything is in such a mess. He said, everything is dissolved. The next morning, April the 9th, was when we surrendered, when the officials surrendered. We heard some bombing, and then I think at about 10 o'clock, everything died, quit. It was very quiet. And then we heard some rumors that everybody that could walk was going to have to leave the hospital. Well, I could walk, but I still wasn't sure mentally, I still wasn't sure what I was doing. So, on the 10th, the next day, a Japanese officer came in, and he came and he tapped each one of us with his sword. He could walk. He says, go, go. And right away, I got antagonistic, and he turned and he said again, go. Well, I didn't know where the hell he wanted me to go, number one. And I made a big mistake. When I went out, I left the hospital, and had I turned right, I could have went to the mountains. That's the only time when I was a prisoner of war I had a chance to get away. When I went out of the hospital, had I turned right, I could have went to the mountains and went with the guerrillas and fought with them. If I turned left, which took me to Marvelis, is where the death march started. And that's what I done. I turned left. And here again, I didn't have a guard. But by turning left, I made the biggest mistake in my life right there.
You had no idea.
No, I didn't. I didn't. If I had any thought in my head at all, I would have turned and went to the mountains. But when I got to Marvelis is where I got the biggest shock of my life. I was 18 then. I passed my 18th birthday. And I never realized, and it's still hard for me to it's still hard for me to believe what I seen. Like I told you, it might be a little bit emotional.
I understand. Okay, Bob, before we took a little break there, you were telling us about you made it up to Marvelis, and you were telling us a little story there.
Yeah, well, when I got to Marvelis, I couldn't believe the inhumanity that was going on. The Japanese were butchering our guys and the Filipinos. They're cutting heads off, they're shooting people, bayoneting people. I don't know whether it was a problem with communication. We couldn't speak Japanese, they couldn't speak English, they couldn't speak Filipino. I seen one of our sergeants pull a hand grenade, pull a pin out of a hand grenade and hand it to one of the Jap officers. It blew both of them up. I don't know, I had problems with my father. Him and I fought all the time. I guess that's one of the reasons I was in the Army to begin with. But him and I, it was just a vocal fight. We never got to come to blows. I used to think he was tough, but boy.
Your father?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's when I found out, and I realized what the problems we were going to have as long as we had to live under their rule.
Okay. And so you were captured there, and you saw the brutality that and inhumanity that went on and so forth. Then they decided that they were going to take you further north.
Well, can I interrupt?
Yeah, absolutely. This is your story.
What they were doing is trying to get some semblance of order. And our problem is we didn't know what they were talking about, and I don't think they really knew what they were talking about either. But they kept pointing north to this road, so-called road. So finally, when we understood what they were saying, then it kind of got a little better, to where we did get a column of people started marching. And that was the beginning of the so-called Bataan Death March. And I wasn't right at the head of it at the beginning. Apparently it had been going on for a little while before I got involved in it. If you go to Kissimmee, and on the lake, there's a lake up there, there's a monument there now. I was there when the monument was dedicated. There's a monument for the Filipino man and a woman and a soldier. And I was there when this happened. This Filipino man and woman came out. The Filipino guy had some water, and the woman had some rice cakes. And she tried to give it to one of our GIs. And they cut the Filipino guy's head off, and they bayoneted the woman, and they shot the GI on the death march. And that monument is there in the lake in Kissimmee.
Up here in Florida,
In Florida.
Lake Kissimmee?
I don't know what the name of the lake is.
But it's in the city up by the city of Kissimmee?
Yeah, and there's a doctor up there, he's a Filipino doctor that was responsible for that. I was up there when they unveiled the monument. It was one of our conventions we had, and we were there as VIPs. They honored us when we were there because, I guess, for the fact that we were there, you know. And I thought it was very nice they done it. But the march went on, and I was in that march for 6 days before I came to the end.
You were in the march for 6 days before you were?
Before I came to where they put me in a boxcar.
In a boxcar.
And then I wish I'd have been kept walking.
Yeah.
The boxcar was worse than the walk.
Let me back you up just 1 second here. You weren't in fresh starch fatigues when when you were taken out of the hospital or released from the hospital there, what were you wearing about that time? Was it hospital?
That's a good. No, we didn't have any clothes at all. I had underwear, undershorts.
Undershorts, period?
That's all, yeah. And that's all I had for all the time I was a prisoner of war.
No, I didn't know that. I was,
Yeah.
okay, I was
No.
thinking some other line.
I didn't have, I had a pair of shoes, one pair of socks, and my clothes had been stolen someplace. I didn't, clothing was a premium. I just didn't have it.
Okay, so you had several days before you even got to that town where you were captured, and then you had another 8 days before you got to where the boxcars were.
Anything you had to steal it.
Mhm.
So that's where I'm gonna come to where I'm gonna explain, where I learned what I had to do to survive. I'm gonna explain that.
Okay.
I was walking along, and all of a sudden something hit me in the face, and the blood flew up, and I couldn't understand what I'd done. I looked up, and I was going straight, and the column had turned. I was dreaming, and the road had turned, and I went straight. The Jap had hit me in the mouth with his rifle butt and knocked my top teeth out. I couldn't understand the road. Then I realized the road had turned, and I went straight. Now, I don't understand how come the Jap didn't kill me, because he killed him for a hell of a lot less than that. So then I realized that don't daydream. Watch what you're doing from now on. I got hit several times. I tried to help a buddy of mine along. They pulled him away from him. They bayoneted him and threw him in the ditch. This went on for 6 days with me. When we got to San Fernando, that was the end of the town. They put us in boxcars. And the boxcar in the Philippines is about half the size of the boxcar here. They put 100 of us in each boxcar. If you went in standing up, that's the way you stayed. If you went in and sat down, that's where you stayed. Couldn't get up or down. If the guy next to you had to relieve himself, then you were in the way, and he relieved himself on you. Now, it was about 10 or 12 hours that we stayed in those boxcars, and there was no air in there. So we were wishing we were still walking.
Bobby, I'm going to need to take just a short break here for just a second.
Yeah.
2 minutes?
Here's your
Okay, we
tapes.
just took a,
Fine.
pardon?
Your tapes are right there in the package.
Okay, thank you. We just took a short break there, and we're getting back, but we wound up figuring out we have about 2 minutes here before my tape runs out, and we're going to put a new tape in. So, Bobby, is there anything you want to say, what we talked about from before? Or do we want to just wrap this up and get started on another fresh tape?
No, I just say that I found that being a Japanese prisoner of war is probably the worst possible thing that can happen to a person that's in the armed forces. If anybody's got any other thoughts, all they have to do is talk to me, and I'll tell them.
You'll straighten them out,
Damn
won't you?
right, yeah.
Okay, what we're going to do is take one more short break. We're going to wrap this one up, and we're going to go into a third interview of Bob Body in just a second. Be right back.
Ran right into them.
Yeah.
And they had 2 Rangers killed, and they didn't lose one of our, and they killed every guard in the fight. And, I didn't think I could run 30 miles, but I did.
Yeah, that was an adventure even after being...
That was a story in itself. I mean, that was an amazing, amazing escape. I mean, that's known as the greatest escape in World War II. And to get us out of there and get us all out of there safe was amazing.
And they didn't lose a prisoner?
No, we were 30 miles behind the Japanese lines, and they got us all out of there safe.
And most of you walked out?
Well, no, no.
They had
They had carabao
transportation?
carts. They had carabao carts. Some of the guys, the Rangers, had to carry out. But I never was so. As soon as the first gunshot went off, I was on the ground, and I heard a noise in front of me, and I looked, and I seen the biggest guy I ever seen in my life. He had the biggest shoes I ever seen. And I looked up, and it was the biggest guy I ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at him, and I said, "Who the hell are you?" He said, "Never mind." And then I realized he was talking English. I thought there was Japanese coming to kill us. He said, "Never mind." He said, "Get the hell out of here. We're United States Army Rangers. We come to get you." And that's the night I was reborn. That's not in there. That's the night that's a new life for me. Well, that was,
So you made it back to
we
the
made-
U.S. lines.
They took us back to U.S. lines. And them guys have been my heroes ever since.
Okay. We have just 1 minute, and there's a couple of other things that I want to cover. And I'd kind of like to put another tape in if you're up to it.
Got time? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, let's wrap this one up, and we'll put another tape in there and be back at it.
Be ashamed.
It's been a long afternoon for us, Bob, but you have such a fascinating story to
It costs a
tell.
lot of money.
Huh?
Gonna cost a lot of
It's
money.
gonna cost me a lot of money. Okay, bless your heart. We'll write that down on a chunk of ice, and I'll pay it when next week.
When the ice melts.
When the ice melts. At any rate, we kind of progressed a little quicker to the end of the story on the last tape, quicker than I wanted to. We had you 8 months in the Manila prison, and we,
In Bilibid.
in
Bilibid prison.
Bilibid?
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
You done pretty good.
Okay. At any rate, we had you there for 8 months, and then you're transferring out. Now, let's see, that takes us into how long have you been a prisoner already? 8 and
Well, 8 months, well, probably about 9 months, 10 months, something like that,
9 or 10 months. Okay, so you almost been there a year.
almost.
So we've got another almost year and a half, I guess, of experiences that you've gone through. Where did you go, and how did you go, and what were the circumstances of your going to the next prison?
Well, the next one was when I left Bilibid to go up to Bataan on a train.
You went up on train
Yeah,
in a boxcar again,
yeah. Another one of their famous train rides.
and was it as crowded as before?
Just as
And under,
bad, just as bad. Well,
you were a little healthier, maybe.
yeah, I think I was a little better shape. I think
Better
it
shape.
didn't seem quite as bad.
Okay.
Except it was the same way. They were hot, and you couldn't get out to relieve yourself.
And that was, how long a ride was that?
It was probably a couple 100 miles.
Couple 100 miles?
Yeah.
Okay,
Of course, them trains didn't move very fast.
I understand. So by the time you got there, it was, what was the month again? Approximately? Doesn't matter, it's hot over there all the time anyhow.
It was hot anyhow, 120
Okay.
degrees.
Okay, so, so you finally made it to your next destination.
Yeah.
And was the conditions any better, any worse?
No, they were
same?
Well, they were better or worse than what they were in Bataan.
Okay,
I mean, I'm sorry, they were worse than they were in Bilibid.
worse than, okay.
Yeah.
What did you sleep on there?
In Cabana de Juan,
Yes.
we slept on bamboo slats. They're about maybe 3/4 of an inch wide. Then you have a space and you have another slat. And if you had anything you could put over them, all right. If you didn't have, you wouldn't. Sleep on.
And that was laid on the ground?
No.
Okay.
We were in barracks, and then those were like supposedly beds. I didn't realize you could get bed bugs in that, but we did. We managed to get all kinds of bugs.
Mosquitoes?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know who got used to the mosquitoes, whether the mosquitoes got used to us or whether we got used to them, but it got to the point mosquitoes didn't bother us so much.
Okay.
The damn bed bugs did.
Yeah. Hot day and night?
Oh, yeah. And then, like, we had a lot of lice. You could peel back your undershorts and you could see the lice. So when we poured the hot water over our barracks, why we poured the hot water over our undershorts.
Whenever, well, you slept on these bamboo slats on a build-up.
Well, we'd put a blanket over your head, and like I had an army blanket, I'd spread that out.
Okay. And what other? Now that was an amenity of sorts. What other amenities did you have? What other? Did you have any other kind of furniture? Did you have any other?
No. That was all. That was it. That's where you lived.
And where did you? How did like you normally have a locker or something like?
No.
What did you do with anything you might have had?
You didn't have anything.
What was on your back, and that was it?
That's it. I had my sister's picture. They when I was just before Pearl Harbor was bombed, I got a picture of my sister graduating from high school, and I carried that. That's the only thing I had.
Not in a frame.
No, it was a small picture that they sent me from home, and I carried that all over.
And how did you carry that?
In my pocket. I don't know where the hell I did carry it.
You didn't have a wallet?
No.
Right?
And that's a good question. I don't know where I carried it, but I had it.
You had it.
I took it home with me when I got out.
Okay.
I didn't have a billfold.
Okay.
It was all bent and beat up, but it went home with me.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand. I didn't know whether you tacked it to the wall or you
No.
even if
No,
you
if
had
I
a
did,
wall.
if I had it, they'd have taken it away.
Yeah. Okay.
They took everything else.
And there, did the food
No, the
get any better at all?
Food was worse.
Food was worse.
Yeah.
And the food that you ate, who cooked it? Who?
Our American cooks.
Okay, and what did they have to work with? What kind of food did they have?
Nothing.
Well, they had
They
something.
had rice, whatever the Japs give them, rice and like I told you before, rice. If they got this fish powder, or they got these goat that I mentioned before, or sometimes they got some kind of meat. Sometimes they got whatever they got.
And how many buildings were there? Approximately.
I don't know, there's quite a few. At one time, there was about 12,000 people in there.
Okay, that's what I was kind of going to go for.
No, I got a map at home. I don't really know.
Okay, and this compound was in probably behind barbed wire fence?
Oh, yeah, they had barbed wire, yeah. They didn't have the barbed wire, it was gone before me. Yeah, there was a lot of barbed wire. And then they had the guard towers, the machine guns it up, you know.
Could you visit from barracks to barracks?
Yeah, oh, yeah. We-
During the day, what time would you get up, or was there no time element there? Did you have to get down to sleep at a certain time and up at a certain time?
No, you could go to bed, you could go to sleep whenever you want, but you got up when the bugle blew.
And that was sometime about
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
And a typical day, you hear the bugle blowing, and was it anything that was familiar to you before you went over there?
Get your asses out and go to work.
Okay. And
No, if you're in the work detail, the work part of the working detail, then you had to fall off, be counted, ankle they called it. The Japs would line you up and they count to 10, and then they'd start over again. Then you had to go to work. But if you're in the hospital, then you didn't have to do nothing.
Mhm. Now, you could not have stayed in the hospital for 2 years and some months.
No, but I stayed there as long as I could.
I understand that, but when you weren't there, what chores did you get into?
Well, when I had to go to work, I had to go out there and work on the farm. I worked on the airport, and we screwed up everything we could.
And what did you have to do at the airport?
Well, we had to shovel dirt. Everything is done by hand.
Mhm.
We blew up the roller. We built up too high a pressure steam, and screwed up the boiler. And every time we packed some dirt, we didn't pack it. You know.
Sabotage wherever you could.
Everything we could.
Mhm.
They tell us to move rocks over here. We moved as few rocks as we could.
Mhm.
We didn't do anything.
Okay. So, any other tasks?
Some of the guys in Japan on the work details that worked on ships, they put gum in the holes with the screws. See? The ships would sink.
Mhm.
So we done as little as we could. Now, when we worked on the farm, then we had to be different there. We had to work. What we thought was, the theory behind the farm was, we had the land. See, now we could run a farm. We could raise enough food for our own use. But when the Japanese found that we had a good farm going, and we were raising big crops, and we were, then they decided they would sell the goddamn, they could sell the food. Then we didn't get any food from that.
Mhm.
So then we decided that, and then we wouldn't work so hard. So then things went all to hell. Then we all started getting beat up more.
I was going to ask, other than the animosity you showed towards them at certain times and so forth, if during the course of the day you didn't express that, or didn't get in their face about things?
I did when I was working.
Okay, you did when you were working.
Yeah.
But when you or some other prisoner didn't do that, what was the normal treatment of a prisoner?
Well, if it was head down and ass up, it was all right. But if you started goofing off, then everybody got beat up. One guy got punished, everybody got punished. And I don't know, it just seemed like they had to do that. It just seemed like, I've heard afterwards that this is the way, this was their belief, that their officers beat them up anyhow. So, it's what they believed in. I thought at the time, to myself, if I could get you up behind this goddamn place, I'd cut your gut. But, you know, that's their belief. I seen officers beating the hell out of them too.
How long did you stay at this prison here?
Well, I was in there till the war was over, till I got out.
Oh, so it was well over a year at that
Oh, yeah,
particular
I was
place.
there for a long time. Then I didn't want to leave there, because I once you got, it's funny, once you got used to something, you were afraid of what was over the fence, afraid what you know, I guess everybody's afraid of what's,
The unknown.
you know, yeah.
Mhm.
Hell, I know what it's like here, I don't wanna go anywhere else, you know.
Okay.
But, this Cabana de Juan, it was gonna be an army, a Philippine army base, and it was just being built when the war broke out.
Mhm.
And they didn't have a water system, they didn't have toilets, and nothing yet.
Mhm.
So it was up to our army officers to convince the Japanese that they had to finish it. But, when, I knew the guy that went in there on the Graves registration when the war was over, and there was 2,600 bodies that was dug up there.
Mhm. And you said something like 12,000 were at that particular prison?
Oh, yeah, one time there was 10, 12,000
Mhm.
people.
Whenever, let's kind of work our way back up to the rescue then, because it sounds like it's pretty much the same, I don't want to say mundane, it's the same thing day in and day out
Oh, yeah.
over the course of the next
Oh, yeah,
year.
I guess it almost got boring, you know, really, to talk about it. It's the same thing, you know.
Yeah. So,
Well, I guess it didn't, because some of them Filipino guerrillas, a couple of times they woke up and the Jap guards were all dead. You know. And the double guards were all dead.
oh, the Japanese,
Filipino.
excuse me, the Filipino guerrillas
They come up and cut their goddamn heads
came
off.
up and got the guards
Yeah.
and cut their heads off.
Yeah.
What was the reaction of the Japanese
Panic.
when that happened?
Yeah, what happened? How come? You know, who's doing that?
And how did that relate to the prisoners then?
Keep them in.
Huh?
They kept them in for no work.
They didn't
No
take
work.
retaliation against you?
No work those days. No work for 3 or 4 days.
They understood what was happening. It
Yeah,
was
they
not.
knew it wasn't us.
Knew it wasn't you. Huh? That's fine.
I would have quit.
Okay, so we just had a little glitch there with our batteries, and put a fresh one in, and we're gonna pick up where we were just a couple of minutes ago. But before I do that, I'd like to mention that this time that our cameraman is our illustrious Sir George Thurlow, and he's done this for all the films that we've made so far. And
They're good, it's your fault. They're bad, they're mine.
there you go. So, okay, Bobby, we were back with the guerrillas coming in at night and knocking off a few of the
Yeah,
Japanese guards.
My only problem, they didn't kill enough of them, so.
And didn't kill enough of them. Yeah, bless your heart. I can understand that feeling. So, but there was no retaliation against the prisoners.
They never bothered them.
They understood.
No, just the food ration was cut a little bit, that's all.
Mhm. Okay. Was there, were there periods where for no reason at all, prisoners were tortured or punished or?
Well, I don't believe so. There was a few times when the guy would try to escape, and they bring him back, bring their head back, you know. But,
They just treated you like dirt the whole time you were
Yeah.
there, but nothing,
no,
okay,
just treated everybody, you know.
understand it.
Except, like I say, that when, at the beginning, when the guy would try to escape, but he'd bring their heads back.
Okay, well, let's go, because I want to bring you through the rescue and the coming back, and then what your first thoughts were when you finally made it back to the States and so forth, but,
Long to go through this goddamn thing.
okay. So, Okay, so they got you, and you worked your way back to staging area, I guess. They probably put you in the hospital.
We had to walk pretty near all night.
Walk pretty near all
The
night?
guys were in pretty bad shape.
Okay.
And they had the Philippine, they asked me if I wanted to ride one of these caravan carts. I'd get the hell away from me, and I said, as long as I got these legs, I said. But then I got so far, and then I had to ride.
Okay, now I'm gonna kind of speed this along, because we only have 5 minutes left. That
Yeah.
half hour went mighty quick there.
Yeah.
You went into a hospital situation, I assume?
No, they took us to like a camping area. I suppose it was a hospital area.
Okay, they tended out, they had a place fixed up for you, got you deliced, cleaned up?
No.
Didn't do all that?
No.
Okay.
They waited for that. And we were there, I think, 3 or 4 days. Then they put us in airplanes and took us to Leyte Island.
Lady Island,
And then
Lady
they
Island,
put us on a boat.
on a boat?
And then they called us on deck one day, told us to bring all the clothes we had. And then they told us to take all our clothes off, and then they sprayed the hell out of us.
With?
Stuff. I don't know, some kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then they give us all new uniforms and
And then did you come straight back to the U.S.?
stopped in New Guinea.
New Guinea,
And then home.
on board ship?
And then George Blair told me, he said, it was my squadron that flew you out of the Philippines. And I told George Blair, if I'd have known it was your goddamn squadron that flew me out, I would have refused to go.
And I'm sure you meant that,
No.
right? Okay, so then you landed in where?
Well, San Francisco.
San Francisco,
And I
right?
had a, oh man.
Is that
We
another whole
come-
story?
Oh. When that boat, on that ship, when we come,
Side of the,
it was foggy. We're all waiting to see the Golden Gate Bridge, you know. And I don't care whether that's working or not.
okay.
We're waiting to see the Golden Gate Bridge. Everybody was up on deck. And God damn the fog, you know, you couldn't see nothing. So we're all standing there waiting. And all of a sudden, the fog raised, and there's the bridge.
There's the bridge.
I'm gonna cry again. And the fire boats were out shooting water. I bet there was 1 million boats in that harbor.
Mm.
And all the factory whistles, and there was more goddamn noise going on. People welcoming us home, you know. Oh, it was tremendous.
Well, Bobby, the time has run out on us here, and I just happened to notice that you're sitting between the Canadian flag and the American flag. You served both countries, served them well, and as I said before, I'm proud to know you, and thank you for your service to your countries.
This interview just cost you $1,000.
$1,000, okay. Bless your heart. Thank you,
Okay.
Bob.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.